Now, just over 84% of people in Ireland, 3.86 million, define themselves as Roman Catholic in the latest Irish census. It's a slight decrease on the 87% who did so in 2006, but it's still a hefty figure nonetheless. Yet, anecdotally, there appears to be a disconnection between those 84% and the Church itself, with less than half of Irish Catholics attending Mass every week. Ireland is a changing society from that of our parents' generation, where gay marriage and abortion are being widely debated. The revelations from the inquiries into child sex abuse continue, and yet the Church is having to stand firm over its beliefs in a challenging environment. So where's the Church going? How much hope, or how much desire even, is there for renewal? Well, Archbishop Diarmuid Martin joins me now. Archbishop, good morning and welcome. And this is kind of welcome home. You might explain.
I was explaining that the studios here in a place called Diggs Lane. And I lived for probably only a couple of months in a place called Diggs Street. It was a tenement. That's how we got a house in Ballyfermot. But I remember particularly my Christmas. And it's one of the most vivid memories that I got two little cars, and somebody had built a bit of a road, a dual carriageway, where you could put the cars. But they'd done it wrong, because when you came to the corner, you had to sort of jump over the middle of the road. But I always remember that
Happy memories.
That particular Christmas. Yeah, it was amazing when you look back. Yeah.
I also want to refer back to both Bono and to Seamus Heaney, because there is a connection.
Well, I was just saying to you that when I presented Bono to the Pope, which is about 10, 12, 13 years ago now, he was to give the Pope a signed book of poems by Seamus Heaney. And I had all my notes prepared and explaining exactly who Seamus Heaney was. And all of a sudden Bono takes off his shades and gets into the Pope, and he upstaged Seamus Heaney on his book. And I don't know whatever happened to that
Well,
book.
we've all seen the picture of the Pope with the shades.
They have indeed, yeah.
Mightn't have had the same effect had it been a volume of Seamus.
And there was a cartoon which I've been trying to get my hands on, that was Pope John Paul saying to Bono, or Bono saying to Pope John Paul, "Are you free for my next gig?" And he turns to me, because I was in the middle of the thing. He said, "You have to ask my manager."
We should talk about not that Pope, but the present Pope, Pope Francis. I mean, do you know him well?
I don't know him well. I knew the previous popes well. I've met the Pope. He came over to me on a number of occasions at synods of bishops. He was very well informed about what was going on in Ireland, very interested in Ireland. There's a certain Irish-Argentinian link. For example, the Irish Christian Brothers have a very prestigious school there. There's some of the Irish Palatine priests have worked there for
But in addition,
many
the
years.
Irish people who came there centuries ago, when they speak English, the Argentinians speak with an Irish accent.
Yes, yeah. That sometimes the people don't lose the accents like that. He's certainly I remember him as a very quiet man. You'd meet him very much on his own, but his sort of exuberance, I think, is taking everybody by surprise, and I think that's part of. There's a certain sense of development, you might say, in the man. Yeah. Just before the 15th of August, which is a big holiday in Italy, all of a sudden, mid-morning, he came to the entrance, or to the door of where he lives in this Santa Marta house, and his valet arrived with his own private car, and the Pope gets into it. And he drives off, saying nothing to the security. And they don't know what's happening. So he drives out, goes round the back of the basilica, goes down, into another courtyard, out to a street which really only leads out into the city. Yeah. And then just before that, he takes a left turn and goes down to the part of the Vatican where they have the carpentry and the plumbers and so on, to wish the workers happy Ferragosto, and heads back. But you can imagine the panic that puts into the security people. They just don't know what he's going to do.
Because I remember when the night after the conclave, or the night of, when he had been declared Pope, and he took off because he realised that anonymity was about to be gone forever, and went motoring around the city in a Volkswagen Beetle.
How far he does, some of these things are maybe a bit exaggerated, but there are other things. He came out to the Swiss Guard. They have a Swiss Guard outside his door with a chair. And he said, "For God's sake, sit down." He said, "You're standing there." And the fellow said, "But my orders are that I must stand." And he said, "I am the Pope and I give you the orders." But there's interesting, everybody I know who knows him well, they begin their story the same way and they end their story the same way. They begin by talking about his simplicity, his concern for the poor, his absolute hatred of waste. For example, that if he was at an ordinary table and there was something left on the plate, he'd get up and bring it to another table so that it wouldn't be thrown away. But then they end their story with the same way as well. He's as tough as nails. and you know what's going to happen when it happens. He decides, he takes his counsel, but he's a man who's and he'll really need that in the job that he's in.
Yeah, I noticed there was a new appointment announced, if you like, his Prime Minister.
We'll see. Is the role going to be exactly the same as in the past?
Because it's an Italian who was the Papal Nuncio to Venezuela. South American connection again.
Yeah, but
so how do you?
He'd worked in Mexico, and he'd worked in. He was a deputy foreign minister in the Vatican. I know him well, a person of great integrity. I've seen examples of, simple examples of integrity. A man who was extraordinarily highly respected, and probably was eased out to Venezuela. And now he's finding his way back.
Now he's back. Now you can see where I'm going with this conversation. Speculation about yourself. That you're a man they really desperately want back in the Vatican.
Who said that? I mean, there was an article in a religious journal in Ireland, which, if you read it carefully, it was based purely on clerical gossip in Dublin diocese. And I honestly
not
believe
on Roman gossip.
Read it. If they believe Roman gossip, they've misunderstood who this Pope is. But this Pope, they'll know what's happening when it's happening. The speculation has always been off the mark. But they dedicated 3 pages to this story, when there are many more serious things that
Well, they did mention that there are key people who are in the Reform Council that the Pope has set up, and that you'd be well acquainted with a lot of them, and you'd fit in.
So they might all, those same people, some of whom came to visit me in Dublin, might be very happy that I stay here, and for the
Keep
right
you out
reasons.
of the way.
No, for the right reasons, because what's going on in, but this type of speculation, we have to get away in religious journalism and so on from idle speculation, from clerical gossip.
But if he called, you would more or less have to go, would you not?
Well, yes, but I would be very surprised if he did.
Would you be disappointed?
I am very happy in what I'm doing,
but I know you love Rome. You do love Rome.
I love Rome, not so much from the Vatican. I love Rome. I lived there for so many years, and therefore, I have friends there. And I have friends' children, and their children now. And when I go to Rome, I go to visit them.
It's like family.
And rather than going into, I haven't been inside the Vatican for a long time.
Yeah. But you still, you read.
I'm still and I read, and I'm in touch, and
you can parse that situation better than any of us.
But I believe that, the new Secretary of State is 10 years younger than I am. And I believe that you do need younger people to go in there.
But perhaps they need mentors.
I'm 68. I'm 68. I'm beginning to, as you begin at this stage, most of my friends in Ireland are retired, and my Italian friends are retired.
I can counsel on new beginnings, I think.
Yeah, well, that's
you can reinvent yourself.
Sometimes, in fact, a big change is what you need in life.
Going back to some of the things on our agenda, most recently this morning, the Minister and his initiative on access to primary and post-primary schools, there doesn't seem to be any criticism of it at all. It seems to be a good idea.
Yeah, well, first of all, that the vast majority of children in Ireland get to the school that they want to. There are cases when that doesn't happen. I think the case he gave of the sort of soft pressure that's put on people to go somewhere else, because strangely, people who talk about pluralism in education opt out of pluralism by going to schools which are very, very, very like-minded, in which there be very few people with disability, and in which there's similar economic background. There is also a problem. I'm looking at, you have your statistics there about the Catholic Church. There are some differences in Dublin. At the last census, 25% of the people living in the Archdiocese of Dublin registered as something other than Roman Catholic.
Okay,
it's much larger than in the rest of the country. There are more children in Dublin diocese under 4 years of age than there are over 75. And the children of 1 and 2 year old, those cohorts are greater than those of 6s and 7s. So we need more school places. The big problem isn't just about the options. The big problem is, are there going to be enough desks in our schools for the years to come? And some of the crises that occurred maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where children didn't get places in school, it was because there was no forward planning.
Yeah.
And this, to me, is one of the biggest challenges. Forward planning, ensuring that the excellence of education that we have provided, pupil-teacher ratios, for example, if we don't maintain that excellence in our public schools, then people will start using these other ways out to get their children into schools which are a little bit more exclusive.
People have a certain amount of choice in this part of the country. We're always lecturing our brethren in Northern Ireland about how mixed education, multi-denominational education would do them as a society a hell of a lot of good. What is your view on denominational education?
I've said very clearly that the situation in which, for example, in Dublin, about 90% of all primary schools, that I'm the patron of them, it's no longer tenable. It doesn't respect reality. The big problem is when you go and do the surveys, parents tend to say, well, we don't want to divest these schools. Then you have to ask, what actually is going on? Are they saying we don't want change? Are they saying, well, we don't know what might come in its place? So I think the debate has to go deeper. But I believe that I'm in favour of Catholic schools for Catholic parents, but I believe that until we have valid alternatives on a wide scale across the country, that we're actually weakening the argument for Catholic schools. And we're going to there is the problem of the standalone schools in rural areas, but far more has to be done, and I believe communities should be more radically honest with themselves as to what they want. I don't want Catholic schools light.
Okay, but should Catholic schools be for Catholics who are Catholics or for a la carte Catholics? Because the minister is saying you can't test anyone, you can't assess anyone. It's got to be an open and fair and transparent policy. Can you actually then say, well, do you go to Mass every Sunday?
Well, I mean, the definition of Catholic can be very varied. But I think that it isn't that the church should be carrying out these examinations. But if people want to say, we want our child to go to a Catholic school because then they can make their first communion and then leave, have no more contact with the church, a lot more debate has to go on. What is a Catholic school? What type of pluralism do we want in Ireland? And that comes back down to what type of religious pluralism we want in Ireland. At the moment, we're still in a transition, and very often, particularly in the schools, arguments are made which are not really about religion. They're about a good school, and we don't want to rock the boat in a good school. And I understand parents want that.
And the question is, how big a part does religion actually play in many of the schools that are nominally denominationally Catholic?
And that's why I believe that the only way in which we will if people do not move towards a divesting and new arrangements within our communities, then the possibility of maintaining Catholic schools will probably die out.
I mean, do you think that many Catholic schools are more denominated by whether they play rugby or hurling and how well they play it, and that they become the important?
I think no, a good school. I think most parents, if they're asked what they want, a good school. In the case of primary education, they want a good local school. And it's very interesting now that one of the groups that's not are finding great difficulties are private preparatory schools, fee-paying schools, because most people, there are some cases that people don't have the money, but I think most people are very happy to have their child go to a local school, and we have extraordinarily good local primary schools in the Dublin area.
I mean, the mantra is, all things being equal, the best school is the school around the corner.
Yeah. If it's a good school.
Yeah. A number of other issues which have been in the headlines. I mean, the gay marriage thing and the polls suggesting there would be an overwhelming level of support for legislation for that. Yeah. What is your view? Because, I mean, in France, for example, where I got married, I got churched in France. Yeah. But I had to have the civil document before I could be churched. Yeah. The Catholic Church wouldn't deal with me.
There is, and this is the same in a number of European countries. There's a growing divergence between the Church's understanding of marriage and the predominant understanding of marriage in society, and particularly the understanding of marriage by the state. In the long term, maybe we have to start looking at saying that the people who get married in church, that they come as part of their faith commitment, and that it's a development of their faith, and that it's in full understanding of the church's teaching. That said, I believe that marriage and the differentiation between the sexes isn't simply a social construct. It's something that's very basic in the way people, humankind has been created.
You think it's biological?
And therefore, it is biological, but I believe it's actually there's something there, that there's something special about the mutual enrichment of two sexes. And out of which then come children, which are born in that loving relationship, hopefully.
Even though there are other versions of loving relationships, children raised by grandparents, children raised by gay couples, and so on.
But there is something in that I believe is fundamental in society, and that in the debate that I believe it's important that be said. And that people have a right to say that. This isn't necessarily imposing a view on society, but in a pluralist society you have to listen to every side. The Church, if you look at every country around the world, in questions of abortion or gay marriage, the Church has taken a very strong line. And I don't think people would expect the Church, to not to do that. But it will be done. And this is important. The Church has to learn how to fight its battles in a respectful and in a noble way in a pluralist society.
An example of that
you expect that country, that way of doing it would be appreciated.
An example of that civilized debate might have been the debate about the Protection of Life During Pregnancy Bill, which is now law. That was not as outrageous, I suppose, in the nature of the public discourse than previous debates were along.
And yet the Church did express its view very, very carefully. And there's a certain sense in which for the Church to compromise would be for the Church to lose. That even though you may lose the political battle, that stressing your values in an uncompromising way is something that people expect.
But can you live comfortably with that act as it is now passed? I mean, do you think that the safeguards are there and that the medical profession is sufficiently developed and ethical?
I believe that the vast majority of the people who work particularly in maternity care are absolutely convinced, and they have their convictions that they do everything they possibly can to save both mother and child, and that has been the practice in Ireland. The conflict cases are few; they're very serious. But I believe that the commitment that we have in the medical profession, the only danger is that in any society, if abortion comes in with some sort of a stamp of approval, that it could change the overall culture in which people look on abortion over time. That's not. I wouldn't want in any way to denigrate those who deal with crisis pregnancy questions in our hospitals.
Is that just a possibility, though?
I believe. Or
are you genuinely apprehensive, or do you think that by and large it will be okay?
I believe that that there will be a change in culture, and that. But we'll wait and see. One of the interesting things is that the Minister for Health will gather the statistics, and they will be published, and people will be able to see exactly what's happening. It's very important that we respect that process, and we don't, for example, as we've had cases now where reported in the newspapers, which is unfortunate that they're done in this way.
Yeah, I suppose in summary it could be that you might be slightly apprehensive about the law of unintended consequences.
It's natural that at the moment people have been very hesitant to do, sometimes out of fear, to carry out practices even which I would have no difficulty with. I think in general the practice in our maternity hospitals has been one that there will be very little difficulty for the Church.
Another area upon which you have views is the compensation for the people who were inmates of the Magdalen laundries. Do you think that the system that has been reached is pretty fair?
I don't know exactly the details of what the sisters have proposed. I do know that they do look after a very large number of these cases, and they're the cases of people who really do need and will always need some type of sheltered accommodation and lifestyle. That's a different thing from sheltering them with a lock and key. I do know that some of these women will say that they don't want publicity. They just want to be looked after and be allowed to lead their lives. There is need for that. Now, this is a contribution the sisters are making, and I think we should.
And there is a value that, if you're an accountant, you could put a value on that.
We have to be looking at in society nowadays to monetize certain things which in the past we took for granted. For example, even in areas like building trust and so on, which are very important in society, but that has to be monetized and see those who build up trust and stability in a society. What is that? What does it cost, and what is the cost it's bringing to society, and recognize that.
On a general point, do you think that we maybe sometimes view everything through a 2020 prism of hindsight? And, what is now politically correct? I mean, when you were growing up, I'm sure, like myself, the regime in schools was rather harsher than it would be today. And yet...
but there's a more fundamental thing here, and that is the place of the church in Irish society was one of dominance. And it wasn't good for the church. Now, you can say that with hindsight.
Yeah.
And you have to ask, why did certain practices and things happen in a Catholic environment that should never have happened? The church can be purified and brought back to its own mission by being freed from some of these. Now, people will say to me, when I say that, you're trying to run down the church. In that same Catholic paper, it was said last week that I would go abroad saying the church is at a breaking point. Find where I said that. I don't say that. But I do believe that unless the church changes, but I think Pope Francis is showing us the way that it changes. Mm-hmm. He said, we know the church's teaching. I'm not going to be repeating it all the time, but I'm coming back to the other more fundamental thing. He said the church should be the welcoming embrace of Jesus Christ. And if we don't come with that understanding of what church is, then we're just an ideology. We can repeat doctrine ad nauseum. We can clinically expose and correctly expose moral teaching. But if we don't have that living embrace of Christ's care, then we're no longer the church. And we have to move away from that type of presence in society into a different one. And it's a very slow process in Ireland. Part of it is that the church as an institution is very slow to give up some of that. And on the other hand,
it's been
the moment you say that, then other people will start saying, well, they want to be out of everything, so we take over everything.
Yeah, but I mean, part of the issue is that in the past the church has been clerically led, and we looked at the stats from Maynooth, 20 new candidates, maybe 5 or 6 will make it through at the end of the day. There's going to be a major shortage of priests.
I mean, I've just finished today the major changes which we have in very often, in Dublin we have huge challenges. I was in one parish over this weekend in Avoca, 4 churches and a prison. I visited Mass in all 4 churches, and I was in the prison there. There's 1 priest and 2 retired priests. It's a very challenging thing. But there, the lay people are actually doing a huge amount. And some of the smaller churches, the lay people have always done that. And I believe we will have a varied. In Dublin now we have deacons, we have lay pastoral workers, and it's a slow process.
But it's going to be a tough job ahead.
Yeah, but I think that the communities themselves are recognising this, and that they're beginning to take responsibility. But the renewal of the church will be a renewal of quality rather than a renewal of statistics.
Archbishop Diarmuid Martin, thank you very much for coming home to Diggs Lane.
Thank you.
And joining us on this programme this morning.
I hope that you'll do well, but I'm also a very strong supporter of competition. And I hope the others do well as well.
Yeah, well, there's room for everybody. Okay. And plenty of listeners out there to be shared.
We were talking there about pluralism. Pluralism has to be real. You know, but also with regard to the religious makeup of Ireland, everybody respects one another.
All right, Diarmuid, thank you very much for joining us, Archbishop Diarmuid Martin.